What if Canada's lithium export restrictions were never about supply chain management or trade retaliation? What if this was strategic resource control? Reports indicate Canada has restricted critical lithium materials, forcing Tesla production facilities to slow operations. This is not temporary disruption. This is deliberate shift in global power over critical minerals, suggesting that while Trump focused on steel and aluminum, Carney built leverage over something far more valuable: electric vehicle production. Canada has reportedly tightened export controls on lithium compounds used in battery manufacturing. These restrictions come as North American automakers, particularly Tesla, rely heavily on Canadian lithium processing for their electric vehicle production lines. Multiple reports suggest that Tesla facilities in Texas and Nevada have experienced production slowdowns due to material shortages. This is not speculation. This is operational impact with measurable consequences. The White House has described the situation as concerning. Industry analysts have noted the disruption. But the real question is not whether production has been affected. The question is why this is happening now. The timing is not coincidental. For months, Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, framing them as economic strength. Canada responded differently. Canada waited, diversified, and now acts on a resource that matters far more to the future economy. Lithium is the foundation of battery technology. Without lithium processing, electric vehicle production collapses. Canada controls significant North American lithium refining capacity. This distinction is critical. Trump focused on legacy metals. Carney focused on future resources. Trump imposed tariffs that hurt American consumers. Carney restricted access to materials that underpin the entire electric vehicle sector. Trump acted impulsively. Carney acted strategically. This is not about matching pressure. This is about applying pressure where it has maximum structural impact. Consider the economic structure. Canada does not simply mine lithium, but refines it. That refining capacity gives Canada leverage. Raw lithium is globally abundant, but processing into battery-grade compounds requires specialized infrastructure Canada built. American manufacturers became dependent. Now that dependence is strategic leverage. Tesla is most visible, representing future American automotive manufacturing, now vulnerable to Canadian export policy. The financial implications are significant. Tesla's stock value ties to production capacity. Delays reduce revenue. Supply uncertainty increases investor risk. When a critical input is restricted by foreign government, uncertainty compounds. This is not about one shipment, but whether American manufacturers can rely on Canadian supply. If uncertain, investment shifts and economic power moves. Consider the broader strategic picture. For years, the United States treated Canada as subordinate. Tariffs imposed without consultation, trade agreements renegotiated under pressure, economic threats routine. The assumption was Canada had no real leverage. That was wrong. Canada does not need to match American economic size. Canada needs to control resources American industry cannot easily replace. Lithium refining is exactly that. Reports indicate Canada framed these restrictions as domestic industry protection, prioritizing value-added processing over exporting raw materials, not presented as retaliation but as industrial policy. The effect is identical. American manufacturers lose access. Canadian leverage increases. Narrative shifts from vulnerable partner to strategic gatekeeper. This framing matters. If Canada imposed retaliatory tariffs, it appears reactive. By framing as domestic industrial strategy, Canada appears forward-looking, not responding to American pressure, but building long-term economic strength regardless of Washington. That is more powerful than retaliation. That is strategic independence. The institutional response reveals reduced leverage. White House expressed concern but announced no immediate countermeasures. Congressional leaders called for supply chain diversification requiring years. Industry groups requested federal support that does not replace lost supply. The response is reactive, defensive, signaling reduced leverage. Trump built his brand on economic toughness. This situation exposes structural weakness. Toughness cannot solve. Economic data confirms the impact. Lithium prices have surged in North American markets. Analysts estimate production capacity reductions in double digits at affected facilities. This is a supply shock with measurable consequences falling on American manufacturers who assumed Canadian supply was guaranteed. What makes this damaging for Trump is the contrast. Trump imposed tariffs that economists criticized as self-inflicted harm, raising costs without creating leverage. Canada's lithium restrictions target a critical input American manufacturers genuinely need. They create real leverage and force strategic recalculation. Resource control proves more effective than tariff escalation. Carney did not need to threaten or escalate publicly. He allowed Canadian industrial policy to speak for itself. Now, American manufacturers recalculate dependence on Canadian resources. This is strategic discipline. While Trump focused on steel and aluminum, Carney positioned Canada to control materials defining next-generation manufacturing, not reactive politics, long-term strategy. The lithium policy highlights a broader trend. Countries controlling critical mineral processing use it as geopolitical leverage. China did this with rare earths. Australia explored similar measures. Canada now follows. The message is clear. Access to critical resources is contingent on political relationships. When relationships strain, access restricts. For Trump, this development is particularly problematic because it fundamentally undermines his core economic narrative. He claimed that aggressive trade policy would force other countries to submit to American demands. He claimed that tariffs would bring manufacturing back to the United States and restore American industrial dominance. He claimed that America's sheer economic size guaranteed dominance in any trade dispute with smaller partners. But Canada's lithium restrictions demonstrate that size does not equal control. Strategic resource positioning equals control. And Canada has positioned itself with remarkable effectiveness, while Trump was distracted by symbolic battles over legacy metals like steel and aluminum. The contrast between Trump's approach and Carney's approach could not be clearer. Trump imposed broad tariffs damaging American economic interests. Carney restricted access to a specific resource American manufacturers depend on. Trump acted publicly and impulsively. Carney acted quietly and strategically. Trump's policies generated domestic political backlash. Carney's policies generate international respect for Canadian economic sovereignty. One strategy is about rhetoric, the other is about measurable results. This is also a lesson in leverage. Leverage is not about size. Leverage is about controlling what the other side cannot easily replace. Canada does not have a larger economy than the United States. But Canada controls lithium refining capacity that American electric vehicle manufacturers rely on. That asymmetry creates leverage, and Canada is now using it strategically. Trump thought leverage came from tariffs and threats. Carney understood that leverage comes from strategic resource control and patient positioning. If restrictions continue, American manufacturers face difficult choices. Building domestic refining requires years of investment. Alternative suppliers are limited globally. Negotiating with Canada requires acknowledging Canadian leverage. None are quick. All represent strategic defeat for the narrative that American policy dictates terms to neighbors. The restrictions may accelerate broader recalibration of North American trade. Canada was treated as a reliable supplier with limited power. That assumption is being tested. If lithium restrictions succeed, other resources may follow: nickel, cobalt, rare earth processing. Each represents potential leverage, suggesting Canada's relationship with the United States is more balanced than assumed. Trump failed to understand economic relationships are not zero-sum. They are networks of mutual dependence. When one side exploits through tariffs, the other reduces vulnerability. Canada did exactly that. diversified trade, invested in value-added processing, built leverage over future resources. Now Canada uses that leverage strategically. Carney's strategy has been consistent, not responding to provocations with threats, not escalating publicly, building structural advantages quietly. The lithium restrictions are framed as industrial strategy, not retaliation. But the effect is clear. American dependence exposed, Canadian leverage demonstrated, power balance shifted. This reveals limits of Trump's economic nationalism. Nationalism relying on threats cannot replace strategic resource control or rebuild supply chains overnight. Trump's approach projected strength without strategic foundation. When tested, it collapses. Canada is testing it now. The possible restriction of lithium exports marks a turning point. It shows that Canada is willing to use economic leverage when necessary. It shows that American manufacturers are more vulnerable than they assumed. It shows that critical mineral control can be more effective than tariff escalation. And it shows that Mark Carney's long-term strategy is delivering tangible results, while Donald Trump's impulsive trade policy generates unintended consequences. Tesla's slowdowns symbolize strategic miscalculation. Trump thought he could pressure Canada into submission. Instead, Canada built leverage over future economy resources. Tariffs triggered restrictions threatening existing production. Aggressive rhetoric created political space for Canada to act independently. Canada's restrictions demonstrate resource control matters more than economic size. They show patient strategy outlasts impulsive pressure and prove leverage is built through investment, not threats. They confirm Carney understood the economic landscape better than Trump. The lithium blockade was supposed to be unthinkable, but it is happening because Canada built the capacity, positioned strategically, and refused subordinate status. Carney recognized the future economy runs on batteries, not bluster. If you value analysis of economic power and strategic resource control, subscribe to Canada Today. We track leverage, consequences, and shifts in global economic balance.